My name is Rachel Senzee. I'm the Neighborhood Services Supervisor for the City of Jefferson. That really encompasses housing, redevelopment, grants, our sustainability programs, and also historic preservation. So they kind of, I tell people like everything that's happening in the neighborhood usually comes through us in the city. There's 4 of us total, so our plates are super full. So we really are methodical about how we operate our programs. So it's not always what I would say the best, but we do the best that we can with the resources that we have, as I'm sure many in this room are familiar with. So today, John asked if I would come in and talk about our Bruhn Revitalization grant. The city of Jefferson was one of 11 recipients in the nation to receive one in 2021. And we can talk about that project. It's not all the way completed. We still are working with our sub-recipients. So I'm going to really talk about and really I have from application to administration, but it's really pre-application to administration. So I'll share with you our personalized experience of working with this funding mechanism, good, bad, and ugly. The first one we'll talk about is what is the Bruhn Revitalization? This is a federal funded program for the National Park Service. Paul Bruhn was a historic preservation advocate for the state of Vermont. And he would go to Congress and this granting program is the federal grant is brick and mortar projects, and that's what really attracted us to it. We do utilize the historic preservation fund grants that are available from the SHPO. Usually on an annual basis, we get a couple of them. But the Paul Bruhn grant was really attracted to us because it could fund construction, where a lot of the preservation grants that we run into are a lot of survey work, but it lacks the brick and mortar. We really wanted some brick and mortar funds to be able to spend in our community. The awards are typically $200,000 to $750,000. When the city received our award in 2021, there was 11 recipients of that award. I think I saw in the most recent one, they're funding up 15. So they're getting more money from Congress. So I think that's a good sign that this program is working across the nation. Most of the Paul Bruhn recipients are state SHPOs or state historical societies that then sub-grant out to the rest of their state. There's a few cities, and we are one of those. But it really kind of has to depend on your capacity to be able to operate it. The goal of Paul Bruhn is to foster economic development through rehabilitation. So this is not a program that you really want to focus on residential areas. You really want to focus on kind of your historic commercial centers. And it has to be a subgrant program designed for a specific building type or a service area. So it's not something that you want to apply for and you think, and if you have a building in your head, get it out of there. Because that's not the intent of not the intent to go and preserve the city hall or the courthouse, somewhere else, or a church. That we get that a lot, that somebody has a pet project that they really want to spend the money on. That's not what this program is for. Some of the states, I can't remember which one, they're going after historic theaters. So any of the historic theaters will apply. That's a state program. But that's the specific building type. For Jefferson City, we chose a service area. We chose our Missouri State Capitol Historic District, National Register District, and also our Old Munich Commercial Historic District. So we have kind of 2 areas that we're targeting these program funds for. Before I get into the weeds of the program administration, this was a long process before we even applied. We identified this funding 2 years in advance before we actually applied to do the homework and advance this. So the first part is we really needed to know the community. So Jefferson City background, statehood in 1821. Which there was nobody here, and it was very, very rural. At the time, it's like they put the point on the map and said, hey, it's close to river, it's in the middle of the state, this is going to be the state capital. So the development of Jefferson City as a community really was driven by the state deciding that that's where the state capital. 1833, the Missouri State Penitentiary was our kind of first big development. 1866, the Lincoln Institute, which is now Lincoln University. But our peak development period that we're looking at for our commercial centers is really between 1880 and 1930. This is our high street. I'm going to focus a lot on downtown, and I'll get to only different. So we found this old postcard online of High Street 1910. And something I want to point out is it looks look, yeah, we have 1880 to 1930, but think about all of the context of development that happens within that 50 years. It's a lot. So here you see, look how narrow the streets are. Look at the utilities. Look how people are interacting with the businesses. Look at the businesses themselves and their storefront names. This is somewhere around World War I. So you got the parade. Still don't see, I don't see the trolley on there. We used to have a trolley downtown, so we don't see the line. But again, look how the storefronts changed. So I think sometimes, like as for historic preservation, we get stuck. We find one picture and we feel like that's what we're supposed to do. But there's really 50 years that we can work within this, and that's okay. And then we've got a later picture. Really want to highlight, this is the 200 block of East High Street. See like the wide sidewalks and the parking on the side. There's no intro, but you can see some of the lines that are going on there. So again, look how the storefronts change. So there's a lot of options when you're working with property owners on rehabilitating your structures downtown. This is today, early morning. So we've got some projects. So this is kind of the downtown area. So why, besides just throwing money at historic preservation, which we all love to do, one of the things that we wanted to do in our application is the why, the justification. It's hard to go to a federal agency and say we need money to fund historic preservation projects in our community, and you're competing with all the other communities in the country. Why is yours more important than everybody else's? So we really highlight our losses and our challenges. This is 200 East High Street, or was 200 East High Street. We had a partial building collapse in 2018. Thank goodness it happened in the middle of the night, so nobody was hurt. The picture on the left was just the wall blowing out. Brick, and that moisture got trapped in the wall there. We had to, and the terrible part is this on the east side of this property was a common wall with a neighboring structure. So it was lawsuits. It was the city actually had to step in and do this demo because of all the parties that were involved. We thought we might lose 202 as well because of that common wall. So we really just this took us about 3 years to work with this disaster. We ended up demoing 202 is fine. It's saved. It does have kind of an EFS fold seal on the side of the building. But you can go downtown and see the vacant spot where 200 East Side used to be. So this was 2018. Then we have our Union Hotel, which is also our Amtrak station. I don't remember, Tiffany, do you remember when was that 2018 or 19? 19. The north wall started bowing out. So we had to shut down, the state had to come up with another Amtrak station, which is still currently a trailer in the state parking lot. You gotta do what you can with what you got. We also had, in May of 2019, we had an EF3 tornado crush right through kind of our old historic area. It missed downtown, but it will be the first blocks. but it hit our East Capitol residential neighborhood severely hard. That was one of the buildings that was lost. There's our mayor in the middle of East Capitol Street, hugging a resident. So we talk about historic preservation, but it's also a people thing. Because there was this particular family that structure had been in the family for generations. So that was a heavy loss for them. So we have all sorts of bad problems. There's kind of a map of the tornado path. So right here is kind of our downtown area. And then over here is our old Universe. So the tornado went through right here. That's pretty darn close. We had a lot of roof damage. We didn't really know what we had left. Because even if you're not directly impacted by the tornado, that storm and the hail that comes with it and the downdrafts, especially on your load-bearing brick masonry, it just kind of left us with, we had 200 East Side happen, we had the tornado happen, we're having all of these failures of our structures in this community, and we don't even know what's going to happen next. So we decided to utilize, in 2020, actually in 2019, we applied for a historic preservation fund grant through the SHPO to conduct a structural survey of 100 properties that exist in the Missouri State Capitol District, which is our downtown and the old First District. The total project cost was $78,000. 50,000 was HPF, and the remaining funds came from the city. We did have some challenges. We didn't really have any local contractors or local engineering firms that wanted to bid on this project because they felt like it was for property owners. So we had to go with Walt Cookie Moore out of Kansas City, and they ended up doing it. But it was a future-based fear. The property owners didn't know what to expect. Some of our council didn't know what to expect, but the need to know that, why keep it a mystery? Let's find out what we're working with. So we had them survey 100 properties, just street level. They did not have access to the interior of the property. They just worked within the public right away. And we were able to provide property owners with individual reports. Would you mind clicking on that link? Can you click on the individual report? Just to give you an idea of what it looks like.
I guess it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
How big was it? EF2?
GF3.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we are in no fatalities from that either. So we are incredibly lucky. So this is an example of what the individual reports look like. They're pretty benign. They're very short. They're very concise. We basically look at the property, gives its general information. And when we worked with Walter P. Moore with our architectural engineer, we really wanted to figure out a way that we could rate the buildings. Because that's kind of hard to do. It's one thing if you order an engineering report for one structure, but when you're trying to look at a comprehensive view of an area, it was kind of challenging. So we went with red, yellow, green. So you'll see that this property is given a condition of yellow. And if you scroll down in the report, you can see it gives you more of the visual observations and then pictures of what they're talking about. So they can point out little areas that they see deficiencies in your mortar. They have, and so they all of this was from the street level. There was no property owner access. We involved the property owners. We sent out mass mailings. We had public meetings. Just to answer any of their questions, because it was kind of the first time that government hasn't been looked at a property owner's building without it triggering into dangerous building kind of code enforcement activity. But it seemed to go really well. I want to go back to the sorry. I thought we were doing that.
Just hit it. Just hit the X. Hit the X on the top right corner.
Oh.
So here's a map boundary of where our boundaries are, our National Register boundaries are in Missouri State Capital District. And you see that little tiny blurb down of Old Munisburg. And since I didn't show any pictures earlier, I'll show you pictures now. So this is our little commercial center of Old Munisburg. It was historically, this was kind of our German area. We had a lot of German immigrants that settled in the Jefferson. And so this is the Old Munisburg section. Same kind of developmental era, 1880s to 1930. Across the street is Bush's Florist, which you can kind of see the greenhouse off to the side. Has been the same business, same family for over 100 years. So it's you know, kind of one of those little treasures that are there in the Old Munisburg area. We also have Central Dairy, which, you know, originally this was the Central Dairy plant, and then they had the ice cream shop at their offices above. Still there, you can go get an ice cream cone. You can get a two scoops on a cone for about $2.50. So you just go to the same counter. It's a little bit different from what you see in the picture there, but it's still pretty much original. So going back to the structural survey. Here's a list of all the properties. The green condition was based on observations that everything looked great. Yellow is there's a few issues, but nothing, you know, it's something that you need to work on within probably the next 1 to 2 years. Otherwise, you're going to be facing larger issues. And then we had 6 properties that were red, and those were immediate overhead fall hazards that we just didn't know about. So that week when we got the report, of course, it was right before Memorial Day. We had to go out and shut down sidewalks, notify property owners. Because we had 6 properties that if somebody was walking along the sidewalk and the parapet fell, there was going to be some injuries. So we had 6 red, 53 yellow, and 41 green. So out of 100 structures, 59% of our buildings needed some work. So we knew that we had to do some to get some funding to be able to assist. But I will say that this project on its own, once we sent the property owner the survey, once we had a public engagement, once we did our meetings, answered all the questions, the scaffolding went up in downtown on its own. We didn't request it. They just got the report, saw they were yellow, saw that they needed to do some tuck pointing, and it happened organically on its own, and that was wonderful. Most of these properties that are highlighted in red, I think all but 2 have been formally resolved. We're still working with 2 on the other issue. So we found out that we have 59% of our buildings, and while it's terrible, we saw it as an opportunity because now we have our why to go after Paul. So we spent the 2020 year doing our structural assessments. We got those back. I want to say July, August of 2020. We applied for Paul Bruhn, I think in March of 21. And we found out that we were recipients of it in September. So our program was designed to award subgrant 5 to 7 awards. And this is something that's really important to remember when you're sub-granting, when you're becoming the pass-through, is that a $5,000 project is the same amount of work as a $5 million project. It's just the same. So thinking about how you're going to, you know, spread the love with those funds, but also not kill yourself in the meantime, because it's just administratively burdensome to manage multiple projects. All the properties had to be contributing structures within the National Register District, so we did have some disappointed property owners. But they also started stimulating the questions of how do we get on the National Register? We feel like our property is historic, and I'm, you know, just eyeballing it. I'm like, yeah, I don't know why you would have to get included. Maybe you had one of those terrible metal storefront facades on for a long time, and now you show the beauty. But our National Register happened in the 70s, like one of the early ones. So there's a lot, we probably need to resurvey, we do resurvey the downtown and see if we can capture more of the structure. We also gave a point scoring preference during the application process to those that were listed as yellow or red in that structural survey. So we really combined these two projects together. Some of the things you need to know before you apply, have your need well documented. Go take a look at the Paul Bruhn grant, which I did print out about 20 of these. It's not enough. If you go to NPS's website, you can get this as well. But I'm happy to pass this around. Read through those before, like even if you're, if it's something that you're interested in, read through the entire notice of funding opportunity first and highlight the things that you're deficient on. Like figure out the things that you have, figure out the things that you don't have. And if it's something that, if you're really insistent that this grant is the right one for you, go through those deficiencies and get them. Figure out how to make your documentation quantifiable. Like how can we measure this? How can we show that this money that the National Park Service is issuing to this community is making a difference? And make sure you track that data throughout the course of your project. Once you get the funding, it's pretty easy because you have a before picture and an after picture. So that's kind of easy, but some of the things that they're looking for is the economic development record. Did you have a vacant storefront and now you have a filled storefront? Did you have what our problem is in Jefferson City? We're pretty good with the storefronts. We have some work to do, but our upper levels, they just sit vacant and empty. And from the other hat of my job is we have, I'm responsible for housing. So like we could have housing that people are living in downtown, create that 24-hour downtown vibe. But most of our upper floors are empty. So tracking that and monitoring that. Acting as a pass-through is a ton of work. It's not as I think a lot of times, even in my own organization, when we talk about applying for grants, folks just think, oh, you fill out, it's almost like you're applying for a job. You don't just fill out an application and submit a few documents and then see if you get an interview. You're going to waste your time. Really plan ahead, and then the moment that you have all of your ducks in a row, then apply. I had Paul Bruhn sitting on my calendar for 2 years, and I'd see it that first year it went by, and I was like, ooh, we're not ready. And so we renewed it for the next year, and then when it came up, we had all of our stuff ready. So then we went. Again, we knew that we were going to apply 2 years before we actually did. And then again, thinking about how your project is going to accomplish the goals and the objectives of the grant. That really goes into capturing that data. Give NPS something to cheerlead. Give them something that they can put on a report to Congress and say, look how impactful this funding is. And look at where it's going. Also something that this kind of snuck up on us, I would have put it in the ahead of time homework if I know there's going to be issues. I'll share that with you. Determine how you're going to enforce conservation easements. So as a recipient of the funds, NPS requires that you put a conservation easement on the project based off of how much money you're taking. So if it's, I can't remember the exact threshold. I think if it's less than 50,000, you have a 5-year conservation easement. Up to 200,000 is a 10-year conservation easement, and that's kind of why we put that $50,000 to $200,000 range in there, because that was the requirement of the conservation easement. But once we started going down that road, I'm like, who is the people that are using it? So we contacted, I know I contacted Tony. I'm like, can you guys do this or can we do this? And we really worked out that it was better for the city to monitor it because we have living instruments. So we're able to put it in our software system that this property has a conservation easement. So that way, anytime that somebody comes in and what requests a building permit to do work on the property, it'll flag that there's an easement on it and has to go through a certain process. But even then, we have to keep an extra eagle eye on it because we're not going to capture everything. Windows, doors do not require building permits from the city of Jefferson. So even then, we still have like a gray area that we just have to make sure that we try to visually monitor and keep apprised of because we have a gap from being able to enforce that. So think about that, how you try to handle that. And also identifying match for points. So Paul Bruhn does not require a match, but you get extra points on it. So what we did is we put that the property owners were going to provide the cash match. We wanted them to have skin in the game. We only required a 20% match because we wanted to be able to draw out. This is a different thing for our community. Our community is generally in favor of historic preservation for the most part, but it's all very privately funded. They do it on their own. And it's not always, kind of industry standard. It's kind of what they feel is preservation. So we wanted to make sure that we were spending a lot of time making sure that they were able to pony up some match. And then also we provided some of our in-kind staff time as match. And I will note that there's a 5% admin. So you can get 5% of the full grant project cost to fund your staff for operating this grant. But if it's done, it doesn't go. But it's safe. It's neat. Some of the lessons learned with our project is to form a consistent relationship with your subrecipients. Because again, most of our, actually, I would say all of our, maybe one, most of our subrecipients had no formal experience with a process. So talking to them about environmental reviews, talking to them about procurement and prevailing wage, talking to them through their processes, and also, just the normal hiccups that happen when you do a construction project to make sure that you're available to them whenever they need you. Just to talk about the kind of meetings, we had a pre-application meeting just to talk about how to fill out the application. We had an administrative meeting. We had a meeting with one-on-one meetings with each. We had 6 subrecipients that we have. We had one-on-one meetings to talk about just their environmental review and the architectural features that they're going to look for and what it means to actually do a rehab project for the Secretary of the Interior. Then we have one-on-one meetings before the procurement phase. So whenever they are getting ready for the bids out, we reviewed all of their documentation before they submit it out. Because once it's out there and once they do the work, and if it comes back that it wasn't eligible expense, they don't get reimbursed for it. So we really did not want to establish that type of relationship with anybody. And then be upfront with long timelines. And then this was really hard for us because when they found out that they were getting money, they were so excited that they didn't listen. So environmental reviews, because of all the federal funding that's going through the system right now, and because we received this in 2021, the environmental reviews are taking 12 to 18 months. Just the NEPA, the Section 106. And we have contacts with our own office and then contacts with the National Park Service office. But that is real. Before COVID, I would say 3 to 6 months. This is the post-COVID consequence. And it wasn't something that we anticipated, and it did irritate some of our property owners because during the environmental review project, you have to help. You can't make any permanent improvements until they go through that process. So if you imagine if you have like some of ours that applied for a roof, and we're telling them that they can't put on a big roof while they've got water penetration for 12 to 18 months. So we talked about a lot of temporary stabilization. Because you can do temporary work, it just has to be reversible and not permanent fix. Formal procurement was also an issue. This particular grant does not have to comply with Davis Bacon, but the state of Missouri has any improvements over 75,000. So once most of our projects are over 75,000. So we had to talk to them about labor laws and making sure that they're being prevailing wage to the contractors, which made their costs go up. So that's just how it is. But that's not something that they originally did in their application. Even though we had it in our grant guidelines, this is how they work. They still, it doesn't click until you experience it. We also struggled with capacity of specialized contractors. Windows. we have a hard time finding it. Especially when you're talking about window restoration of the commercial structures. And right now, we've got some of our applicants that are actually bundling their projects because they're making that dollar amount go up. So if you can if you put your bids together and you're bundling your bids, and it's a larger amount of that one contractor made, sometimes you can attract somebody from the St. Louis or Kansas City area to come and set up shop and do multiple projects at once. So that is still an ongoing terror in my mind, because it's just the clock is ticking. And we have these rules that we have to comply with, but we can't find a contractor to do the work. We're even having trouble with masonry. Like it's just a struggle. So just be aware that happens there. And I have balance urgent need buildings with projects that are ready. So think about that in your scoring mechanisms. We all want to throw money at the worst building and get rid. But sometimes that's not always the best idea. Sometimes you just have to come back and get it later. Sometimes it's just, you really want to go to somebody that has that project ready, that the applicant that's going to be more organized and get it together, versus throwing it at the building that has the worst condition, but the applicant is not together. So balance that for your project to be successful. Also lean into your local code enforcement processes. I know this is probably not going to be a very popular statement, but we've experienced in this community a lot of loss. But we've also seen what happens when you don't use the tools that you have. And while it's not a good demolition is a preservation tool. It is the last preservation tool. But sometimes if you have an area and you don't demo because you're hoping that somebody's going to come along and save it, you ruin the whole block. Whereas if you go in and you demo, then the rest of your block thrives. So it's kind of like have a bad spot in the beach. You can carve out bad spot and use the rest of the beach. If you let it sit there, the whole beach is going to rot. So we really try to strike that balance. So I told you it's going to be real. So this is of a 206 to 210 East High Street. It was the former Allmeyer Dry Goods company. That is, 1880, sort of 1880 structure. Here it is in the front currently. We just recently, this is one of our sub-recipients of the Paul Dean grant. We just last month declared it dangerous because bricks were falling. So we had to lean into that. One of the other tales of caution that I will tell you, in 2012, we actually applied for a CDBG grant, a community development block grant, to take off. This one had one of those ugly metal facades on the entire structure. We did that. And we're like, look what we did. We're so awesome. It's falling apart because we didn't have the money to go and repair it afterwards. And so we took off what was protecting it, thinking that we were going to expose it and it was going to be great. If you do that, make sure you have
More funds
to go back and actually repair the front of the damage that caused for all that nature that was in it.
Was that a privately owned building?
Yes. Good. So the city, a lot of times, local governments can apply on behalf of private property owners, but you are the responsible entity. So it's a walking a tightrope. So you want to make sure that if you want to take on that authority of dictating what a private property owner can not do. So this is the nightmare. So this is the back of that building. It did have a 1980s. And this is one of our reds, right? So this is one of our reds that came up in the structural survey. When they did the structural survey, there was actually an addition on the back of it. That's why there's so many holes in the exposure. So there's a 1980s addition that was added onto it poorly because it was actually that addition was of the original structure. So what this property owner did is they went ahead and demoed that back half, which we approved of. But they never rehabbed the ceiling up on the back. So they left it open. And we were trying to, and again, goes back to like, this is right in the middle of our 200 block. We don't know what it looks like on the relating buildings on the adjacent buildings. So this it could be another headache for us. So we've got exposure, multiple, obvious failure there. Got a stack of bricks holding up the floor. So, and again, this is all you can see the data. This is something that we're currently dealing with. And I will tell you that the property owners came back and said, wait, they told us we didn't do any work. No. The property owner. So the city, right, so we post a dangerous building sticker. Because the neighbors are complaining, right? They're like, hey, there's bricks falling off of this property. They have bricks falling on the roof. We're afraid it's gonna go down. Our employees park back there. Obviously that's a problem. So allow it to go through that dangerous building process. If we have to demo in order to save the neighboring properties, okay, I hate the loss, but what else are you gonna do? And if you don't go through that enforcement process, what has happened with this particular property owner? Like we're going to get in there and we're going to do work. It probably needs about 1.6 million of structural stabilization. And so now they're in a situation where they don't have the money to rehab and they don't have the money to demo because this demolition is costing more between 5 and 8,000. So they're stuck. They are stuck. So one of the things that we do is going after them code enforcement wise is they realize earlier than if we just sit on it and allow it to deteriorate is that they're trying to unload it, just absorb the loss and move on. So then that if we don't go after them on that code enforcement realm, they will sit on it until it falls. So strong code enforcement is actually a really good historic preservation tool for us because it forces action. Right. And it's a long process. It's not something where we're close to dangerous buildings get on it and where we do and it's only demo. It takes about 6 months of public hearings before it gets there. And that's if the property owner is not responsive. So it's multiple stages of getting them to try to. Did you have a question?
That was kind of my question. For the property owner, the current property owner is willing to try and sell it to someone that would have the funds or the.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of tools that you have on the local level that maybe you are not aware of. So Chapter 353, it's usually used for tax abatement, but it also has an abandoned housing act that you could go in and do a nonprofit could take over the project and they will do the work. And if the courts sign off on it, the property owner then either have the option to give them back or the courts reward the nonprofit with the property. We've used that on Dumpling Street once. It's expensive. Or you can just donate the property flat out to the nonprofit and you get a tax write-off of the value of the property. So then that's tipping a little bit out of the loss of just walking away. So there's a ton of tools that they can use, but if we don't force action, and I think this particular property owner does now kind of come into that realization that they're stuck, and they can't move, and it's going to cost a lot of money either way. But they're aiming for 40,000 of the building, and then the demolition they'll give back up 80,000. So they're looking at, I've spent $120,000 on the building, what was my return? There's a whole lot of loss before there's a return. So that's kind of something that they're going through that process. It's almost like a breathing process of understanding that they've got to walk away. But they won't start it unless there's something that's going to make it.
Yeah, I think they're holding costs and it's the value or whatever. So no, that's what it brought the value down.
Yeah, exactly. So enough about all the failures. let's show. And I will say, because the timelines were so long, that a lot of our projects are still. We have 2 projects that are still environmental review phase. That one being one of them. And the National Park Service actually said because we can't in our conservation easement, because if we're conflicting ourselves with this, we're saying that you have to preserve this building for 10 years, but we also might order the demo. So we couldn't do that. So we basically, the National Park Service said, hey, we need to tell them that they need to get the structural sound in a way that you're comfortable with executing a conservation easement and we can access the grant funding.
What about legal liability? Tell me about, what happens if somebody's sauntering along the front of brick walls, get hurt? Where does that, how does that go?
Well, so that's something that we have to be conscientious of in our downtown areas. Most of the time, in most of the other parts of the city, it's the property owner, and it still is for the most part, but the city maintains the sidewalks downtown. And so anytime that there's a federal overhead fall hazard, building official, public works, or code enforcement, they act because of that. All of our codes mimic the state statutes, just to make sure that we're following line, because if we do have to go through a court process, then it's pretty evident that we're talking about the process. If you follow your own process, because I know a lot of communities, they don't. You have it in your code and they get the emotions and the feelings attached to it. And that always comes back and just has its tail and gets you. It really does. You follow your process.
Yeah, is it up to the CLG to help the city develop those codes? Or is that not part of the CLG responsibility?
So we really take the CLG status. I mean, the city is the CLG, but the Historic Preservation Envoy kind of maintains that status. So we have our permission. And again, the codes, like the code enforcement codes, they go by state statute. Because the dangerous building codes are exercised in the
What about below dangerous building? What about basic local ordinances?
We have, I mean, the state statute really, are you talking about specifically about code enforcement and going after that?
Not enforcement. What if there are no ordinances about preserving buildings, keeping them from falling down, or other than dangerous buildings that the state has rules about? If there are no ordinances for that,
Then you have no authority.
so is it up to the CLG to help the city develop those ordinances, or is that out of our realm?
I don't know that it'd be necessarily, I think it would be a gap. What's that would mean from? What's
Personally,
Marston? So some like a lot of small communities, they just kind of like, so when you have it in writing, then it's clear to everybody, right?
who develops that in writing?
Even if the city,
Yes, but we
the
don't
like
have
a
to.
road data city, where they,
Part of- yes.
yeah. So a lot of times if you have like a planner or, then why not?
Money.
And yeah, and we do that a lot too. And I talk about like, we don't get a lot of, like the 28,000 for the structural survey. We use staff vacancies for. There was no like going to council and say, like nobody gave us money. We worked with it within our own budgets. So smaller communities, I get like, but break that down into little baby steps and utilize the mechanisms that are in place. We were able to get that problem after 2 years, maybe 4, because you're taking consistent little steps to get there. But you're focused, and just because it takes you longer doesn't mean that the value or the quality is any less. But I don't see any reason why if you want to go through a code, right? And and I will say that our Historic Preservation Commission, we're going through a code right now, but we're going to create a own historic preservation chapter. So we do work on that.
Okay.
It's just that not because we already had the tools in place to go after demolition by neglect through a different tool. It doesn't mean that we can establish that with you. But we still have to go through the formal process. We have to go through the Historic Preservation Commission, planning and zoning, public works planning, and then council. We're also getting ahead of public meeting in that too, and we've been working on that for so it's it takes a long time, but it also doesn't feel like it takes that long because you're consistently working towards that same goal. And then let's keep on going. So here are other funded projects. And again, I was hoping by the time that I had gave this talk and be able to see some real progress, but we're just now starting all of those issues and delays and timelines. So we have 109 to 111 Madison Street. This is actually a complete row house. The Cole County Historical Society is kind of in that left section of the building. But then our neighboring picture on the right is the Missouri State Medical Association. They both independently applied, and we thought, oh, how fortunate, this is great. So they are doing a lot of their contractor bundling because originally it was the same row house. It was the correct. We also have 114 High Street. This is the historical photo that was supplied with their application. This is it today. I would love to work on that storefront, but they need a roof. So the money is going to the roof. So it's not as attractive, not as sexy, but
Save the building.
same building. So they're doing a little bit. We talked about working on the storefront, but we're going to have to come back to do it later. It's just not going to happen in this round because that roof is about 200,000. So the problem with the tax savings is it comes at the back end of the project. So you never get that money up front. So the cost of being able to do it up front is what's challenging.
I was thinking that when they did the book and that was the tax savings.
Yeah.
And you take those funds and you save them and start your design.
Yeah, no, when we talk about all those, and again, that's just the come back and get it later. But they are going to do some work on their front, on the brick, but most of that project cost is going to the roof. When we did our structural survey, anecdotally, and we asked you, it's like, if you had all the money in the world, what would you go, what's the worst problem within in our historic areas? And it's like the roofs. They're all flat roofs. They're all got moisture penetration. We had the tornado in 19, but we also had a massive hailstorm in 2020. So we just backed up. So the roofs in our downtown are terrible. So we've got multiple projects that are going just after buttoning up the roofs to increase the water penetration or eliminate water penetration. Also 300 East High, this is the other one that's still in our environmental process. Again, most of their funding was going to their roof. They have a mansard roof, but it's like a parapet mansard roof, so weird. So on the top of the building is actually another flat roof. Of our project. This one has this one's 114 and 122 East Dunklin. It was kind of a boarding house originally. Also in that little old Munich strip. This has kind of been an ongoing process. This is not how the building looks today, but they've done some work on it. So kind of a little bit. They acquired this building, the property owners acquired this building in 2008, and they've really been doing a lot of work to get the property back online. So both of those businesses are occupied. They're working on the upstairs, but it's still working. So here's kind of their progress so far. They really rehabbed a lot of storefronts, and they've got they're going to put healthy in the upper floors. So they this is kind of where they're at so far of their rehabilitation project. So this project is probably the one that's furthest down the line, but it also didn't have it got a need of the insurance proceeds after the tornado. Like that property owner is just being very vigilant and active in keeping it up since he maintained possession in 2008. But it's, again, that balance of what needs it and who's doing it.